Hey guys, Coach Alex here at Athletics Fitness. I wanted to go ahead and talk today about one of the common mistakes that we see in off-season dryland training for hockey players, and that's the misutilization or misuse of circuit training. Okay. So now, when we're talking about circuit training, let's get through some definitions here. Essentially, what we mean is multiple stations put within a workout designed to essentially move the athlete from one station to the next with either no rest or a very short determined amount of rest, preset amount of rest. Typically you're going to see anywhere from 3 to 8 to 10 stations even, depending on what the setup is. So now we'll talk about a specific example that I saw recently in the place in which we train. And I'm going to kind of dissect that a little bit and how we might want to do some things differently or how it might not make sense for what the intended effect might be. But I'll note ahead of time that, as always, these things are nuanced. In this example, I don't necessarily know the intent of the individual who wrote this program, so it's not necessarily fair in a lot of ways to kind of dignify this response without their putting their 2 cents in, but I'm going to do my best because I think I can inherently kind of understand what they were trying to do with this workout, and maybe we'll talk about a couple of things that either I just wouldn't do at all or shouldn't be done at all when it comes to training hockey players, or some things that we could train to kind of optimize this a little bit. So this was the workout that I saw written down, and this is very similar to how a lot of off-season dryland training programs are run, even in the past 20 years or so in hockey. We'll talk about the reasons why, and we'll talk about what we need to do differently on that. So here's the workout. It's 3 sets of 6 different movements here, and they're asking their athletes to work within each of these movements in the 12 to 15 rep range. So essentially what I'm anticipating that means is in a given exercise, like a strength exercise, they're looking for the athlete to self-determine a load that when used in that 12 to 15 rep range is very challenging. Okay, so let's look at the stations. So we've got first one, barbell squats. I would assume that this is a back squat. Okay. Then we have deadlifts. Again, I would assume that this is with a barbell as well. Squat jumps, plyometric exercise, depending on the intent, may also be a conditioning exercise. A wall sit, very, very popular in hockey circles. It's an isometric hold against the wall, quads and calves at 90-degree angle, back upright. Most of us would know what that is. Dumbbell lunges, again, lunging very popular in hockey as a unilateral sport. And then the Russian box, finally a very popular conditioning and plyometric tool in hockey to improve skating power and endurance as well. So let's talk about just circuit training in general and why it's very popular in the hockey world. Okay. So now most coaches, both sport coaches and traditionally hockey strength coaches, have the attitude that when they look at hockey, they see it as a repeated bout sport, okay, in the sense that you are on the ice for roughly 70 seconds for the average shift in the NHL, and you're off the ice for 2 shifts, all right, depending on where you might play or if it's a power play or penalty kill situation, okay? But roughly we can agree it's about a 1 to 3 work to rest ratio, okay? So often we see circuits set up in that 1 to 3 work to rest ratio, which if we're aiming to condition an athlete, absolutely nothing wrong with that. However, when I see this type of circuit training, more often than not, it's not simply meant as a means to condition the athlete. It's also intended to improve strength. It's intended to improve speed, power through plyometrics. It's intended to be all-encompassing in most senses. This right here was 1 day's workout from the context in which I could gather from the program we were looking at. So now, here's the problem with that. If you're trying to get strong, or you're trying to get fast, or gain speed in particular, let's look at the exercises here that are probably designed to do that. So we look at barbell back squats, deadlifts, dumbbell lunges, okay? So those are all what we would probably deem a strength exercise, okay? It's designed to improve force output, right? Or the maximal force that the athlete can produce. So now the problem with putting those in a circuit style workout like this is that we know in order to get stronger, we have to maximize the relationship between volume and intensity. Volume being the amount of work that we're doing, intensity being, in this instance in a strength exercise, the amount of load that we're moving with these 3, okay? So now the problem with putting these in a circuit style workout like this is there is inherently little to no rest to allow the athlete to recover to maximally express their strength in that exercise. So imagine yourself going through this. Your first set of barbell squats, great. That's an awesome set because you are fresh. You're going through your 12 to 15 reps at an appropriate intensity. But however, after that, there's no rest between these subsequent 5 stations. There was a 1 to 2 minute rest following the last station, so you're somewhat rested. You're pretty rested going back in. The problem is you've essentially deteriorated your energy or limited your ability to express strength in this by adding 5 subsequent movements to it, okay? Is this wrong in all instances? Not necessarily, but if you're trying to improve maximal strength output, this is not the way to do it, all right? Ideally, in order to do that, we would like to prioritize our barbell squats. In most cases, we want to add a decent rest interval in between those sets. Best case scenario for improving strength in the barbell squat, we do not have a conflicting exercise in between our sets of squats. And in this sense, we're just looking at any exercise that would take away from our capacity to perform our best in that squat. So even if it utilizes a different muscle group, let's say we pair a barbell squat with a dumbbell strict press, something like that, it's still going to eat away at our energy reserves to be able to use in the barbell squats, okay? So to maximally train strength and improve that physical attribute, we want to separate that out. So we would keep barbell squats, deadlifts, and ideally dumbbell lunges as separate exercises, or as part of, at most, a superset of 2 movements where we're using another movement that doesn't compound with that, so it isn't using the same muscle groups, all right? That's to maximally train strength. Next, let's look at speed and power, okay? So typically when we look at squat jumps and Russian box, now this may have been a conditioning exercise in these instances, but as a plyometric exercise in general, if we're trying to improve speed and power attributes or facets of our game, we want to do those with complete rest, and we want to do them in rep ranges that allow us to execute the movement with speed, okay? So now, let's say that this Russian box is what we're trying to gain power in our skating stride in this exercise, okay? There's not going to be much power when you get through 12 to 15 barbell squats, 12 to 15 deadlifts, 12 to 15 squat jumps, a wall sit, dumbbell lunges. You're probably going to get on that box and see pretty terrible movement, okay? Even in a very highly trained athlete, they're going to get to that exercise and you're not, at the very least, they're not going to be able to express their power maximally, which we know is necessary to improve strength, or to improve speed and power in a plyometric exercise, to take advantage of that stretch shortening cycle. At worst, they're going to basically execute the exercise with very poor technique, which could lead to injury, all right? So for that alone, I would argue that a plyometric exercise that's as advanced as the Russian box, a single leg plyometric exercise, should probably be performed on its own at the beginning of a workout when the athlete is completely fresh, okay? So hopefully that makes sense for trying to train for strength and for power separately. Now, let's assume that we're just trying to condition the athlete, all right? So now here's again where a lot of coaches get it wrong with circuit training. So let's say let's talk about this workout structure here. We've got 6 stations. There's no rest between any of these stations. We're expecting the athlete to go to each station and give as much intensity as possible subsequently through the 6 stations. Then we give them a 2 to 3 minute rest afterwards. So on the surface, a lot of coaches might look at this and say, this is well set up for hockey because we're going to ask them to perform these 6 stations, which we'll call a shift, or make it akin to a shift in hockey. And then we'll give them rest afterwards to be like them coming off the ice for a couple of shifts, right? However, if we look at the actual time here, it's not going to make a lot of sense. Let's look at how long each of these stations might take, even at moderate intensities. Okay, so let's call barbell squats. You execute a barbell squat in, even if it's a second and a half for 15 reps. So you're looking at, at best, like 20 to 25 seconds here. Let's call it 25 seconds, okay? Deadlifts, same thing, probably another 20 seconds. Those can go a little bit faster with a shorter range of motion. Squat jumps, they're moving a little slower at this point, so we can move a little bit faster. We still might be able to move quickly through these. Let's call it, a little bit less than a second a rep, so even if we called it 10 seconds, a a wall sit. So now I don't know how these 12 to 15 reps equate to a wall sit, but let's call that, 30 seconds probably. Dumbbell lunges. Lunges are a slow exercise inherently, so they're going to take a little bit longer. If it's 12 to 15 reps, even if that's only total and not 12 to 15 reps per side as I would anticipate it would be, that again is probably going to take around 30 seconds. And then finally Russian box, that'll be fast. We'll call that 8 seconds, or let's be 10 seconds for easy math. Okay. So what are we looking at here? 45 seconds, 55 seconds. Now we're up to a minute and 25 seconds, a minute and 55 seconds, 2 minutes and 5 seconds. That is how long this conditioning piece is for one round, okay? Now, not many shifts in a game are 2 minutes and 5 seconds, all right? So when we are training this athlete at a point that they're probably never going to need to utilize, does that make it not worthwhile? Not necessarily. But ideally, we want to train our athletes within the work-to-rest ratios that they're going to see in a game, okay? So now what would happen at the end of this is you'd see pretty sloppy movement towards the end of this, right? So this athlete, if they want to do this well, they're going to have to conserve a lot of energy early on in the circuit so that they have something in the tank for the end. In a hockey shift, you don't want that, right? You don't want your athlete to jump on the ice and say to themselves, oh, I gotta go a little bit slower here early in the circuit or early in the shift because I'm gonna need a little bit at the end of my 2-minute shift. It's not gonna happen, okay? The other reason that this is sort of flawed logic as it relates to hockey is that this circuit is written with the intent that we have one level of intensity and we're trying to maintain that throughout the entire circuit. That is not how a shift in hockey works, all right? Rather, a shift in hockey is mainly very average to moderate intensity, right? It's a little bit of coasting, it's a little bit of skating to kind of like support the play with intermittent bouts of very fast movement, right? Sprinting, basically, okay? So what we want is not necessarily an athlete that's gonna go out there and sustain a moderate level of intensity, which is what this would be for a shift. What we want is someone who has the aerobic base to be able to always have their legs under them on the ice, but is strong and powerful and agile because they're gonna make those 5-second plays, dashing for a puck in the corner, beating an opponent down the ice to pick up a puck to skate the icing off, okay? To get around an opponent or to get around a defenseman to go score a goal, okay? These are all instances that require speed and power, not necessarily sustained effort across a 2-minute period. I would take the athlete with that intermittent power over an athlete that can perform this circuit really well, okay? So hopefully that gives you guys some insight into what to look for when you're trying to train your athletes in the off season. We didn't get a lot into how you should train them. We just talked about some of the flawed logic that we've seen in circuit training for off-season hockey players in the past. We'll get into how we optimally train our hockey players in another segment. Thanks for tuning in today, guys. As always, give us some feedback, give us some questions based upon what you learned today. Let us know what else you want to learn as well.